It's the Stranger Nerds here. We have Mitchell Lee, Nick Izzo, Tommy Grant, and myself, Connor Vandermark. And we have here Season 2, Chapter 5, Dig Dug. Um, Written by Kate Treffy and directed by Andrew Stanton on this one. Uh, oh, Me personally, growing up, Dig Dug was definitely a big game. That was my mom used to love, and I had Namco Museum, so it's really, I like seeing the game getting a little love, a little more in this episode. Um, If you haven't played it, give it a shot. It's a fun little arcade game.
Yeah.
So,
I'm
everybody,
glad you said that
talk to the
because I
episode.
had no
So,
idea. All these years I've watched this, I had no idea this was the actual game. I just thought it was some random thing they made up for the
mhm.
show.
the
Was it
um
actually
the
like?
kind of
Oh yeah,
mechanic
that's
for the
good.
game, like the kind of mechanic for the game is like in order to defeat enemies, you have to dig underneath them, and then they will come crashing down, and that's you kind of defeat them in a way. So you have the whole idea is like you have to defeat all the enemies on the screen, and then by doing so, you progress to the next level.
Gotcha.
Good game though.
That makes sense.
It was like honestly like out of the older style of games, that was one that definitely like especially on like the 80s style. Like it wasn't like the old Atari stuff where it's like Pong and things like that. It actually had interaction and like thought on how you have to tackle each level and not get killed.
Gotcha.
So
And that kind of
so
ties
yes.
into a little fun fact. See, a little fun fact. It kind of ties in with directly with Hopper's storyline for this episode, where Hopper literally falls into a tunnel or climbs into a tunnel, if you will, and we find out the monster's just been digging tunnels all throughout Hawkins. So is the Shadow Monster technically the hero of Dig Dug in the show? Is that how that works?
Um in his vantage point, maybe. Who knows?
And
From
then
his POV, I suppose so.
All right,
another fun
so
fact of this episode: Andrew Stanton is the first big name director to actually come into Stranger Things, aside from the Duffer Brothers, which I thought was worth noting. Because in the past, most of the directors for the show have been kind of either first time writers or they've had like one or two credits. Whereas Andrew Stanton is one of the the original founders of Pixar, so he's got a lot of movies under his belt, from Bugs Life, Toy Story, Finding Nemo, a whole bunch of different movies, even live action such as John Carter and Obi-Wan Kenobi show. So he's a
Which
big
was
name.
interesting because
Yes.
I watched this episode today and that came up and I'm like, Andrew Stanton, what the hell? That kind of came out of nowhere. But yeah, he's done Finding Nemo, Monsters Inc., some of the top tier Pixar movies,
Yep.
Wall-E, and then he also did John Carter, which is a steaming pile of dog shit. So it's
But
a
he
What do
varied
you
range
mean?
for
That
him.
movie was so good.
No, I need you to shut the hell up right now. No, it's not. Stop.
But
Stop.
Well, I mean those sarcasm. That wasn't.
Oh, I thought you were being
Those
serious,
sarcasm.
Nicholas. I thought you
No,
were being for
no.
real, as the kids say.
Oh
No,
God, no, no.
no.
it's hard to tell,
And
Nick. So you're just such a serious man. It's hard to vary your different
I thought I
positions.
put enough enough oomph on. Okay, no, never mind. Continue.
Sure you did, Nick.
We'll have to get you like a little emoji stickers to hold up when you're talking.
Oh no.
Oh, I'll just write sarcasm on a piece of paper and just put it in front as I talk.
I like it.
How about that?
Hey,
But
the
yeah,
listeners
so
can't
I
see
thought it
it,
was
but
worth
we can still
noting
tell.
for it's more for us. But so Andrew Stanton wrote directed this episode and next week's episode, The Spy, and those were definitely two of the better episodes of this season, in my opinion. So I think it was almost worth having kind of a more well-known director come in. Because if you've noticed a trend, all of the seasons the Duffer Brothers had it contracted where they wrote and directed the first and last two episodes of every season, and kind of had random people fill in between. So it's almost like they confirm they have a good beginning and end, and it's up for the other people to make sure the middle's good and not bad. but bringing in a really well-known director kind of helps seal in the middle, which I think is funny with how weak this season was overall for those of us that have seen the entire show. But that's just my little fun facts for the start of the episode.
Before we continue, since I'm someone who's not really tied into TV/movie industries, so
Ooh.
how often is
Mhm.
it that like you have different directors per part of seasons or
That's very
episodes?
common.
Because like
I think it depends on
isn't
the
directors
size of the show and the writing cast. And the kind of show it is. I mean, sitcoms are very well known for having different writers for different episodes. And sometimes it's a completely new writer for every episode. Some shows have a very small writing cast, and it's just the same cast for each group. But I think Mitchell might be able to speak more onto that. At least as far as my knowledge goes.
It's very common. One of my favorite shows so far this year, well, I guess not really so far. There's only a few days left. Is The Bear, on Hulu, and there's been only 2 seasons of that, and there's been 3 directors so far. There's been the main director, Christopher Storer, and then Joanna Callow has done 5 episodes, and then Rami Youssef came in to do an episode in season 2, and sometimes it's even more common than that. But you'll see that happen quite often when someone comes in and just kind of guest directs, or maybe they're involved in the writing. Succession is a popular show. That show has had 13 different directors for the 39 episodes of the show. So it's very common.
that's
Which I
wild to
think
me.
can be very risky because you don't know the different kind of writing styles, and that's what you'll see.
Well,
in a
they're
lot of
not
shows
right.
too.
They're
You'll
not. They're
see
not
dips.
writing the. It's
Well,
just the directing.
directing,
The
yeah.
writing comes from the same writer's room or writer, the same showrunners. That's not changing. It's
But,
just
but even still,
the
having
director.
all those different hands in the pot, it's like you see a lot of different styles going into different episodes, and it's sometimes you'd be risky because, I mean, you take the hot topic of this decade being the new Star Wars trilogy. You have 3 different, 2 directors with completely
Don't make me
different
go off.
directing
Don't make me
styles.
go off. Don't make me go
That's
off.
that's my best example I can give. And it's just you have just
And whatever
completely
you
different
think I'm
sense of the
going off,
direction.
whatever you
Basura.
think I'm going off on, I'm not. So
That's just my example. We won't dive into it, but it's the only
we
thing I can
will
think off the
get
top of my
there
head.
eventually. We will probably get there in the year 2024.
We will.
In
But
fact, I think we're definitely getting there in the year
for the sake
2024.
of the example, it's just if you have different, completely different directing styles in the same show or movie, you can get really good or bad reactions from it. But as far as Stranger Things goes, we've had so far very few bad episodes, and that's even a stretch to call it bad. But this season's definitely been very up and down. But so initial reactions for this episode, Connor and Nick, how'd you like it compared to the rest of the show?
Well, fuck you. I'm not giving you my opinion then.
No, we'll save that for later.
Go, Nick.
I
getting
feel
it.
Mitchell's offended now. Should we let him go?
No, yeah,
Let's let him
no.
stew for a little bit.
No, yeah.
We
Oh,
can't
okay.
let him speak yet.
All you, Nick.
I just mentioned Star Wars. We can't let him speak now. We gotta let him process for a minute.
Oh, gotcha. Um, I mean, besides for, I'm trying not to spoil the entire episode. And
You can spoil it.
just
I mean,
this
we're gonna go
one.
eventually.
This whole thing is a spoiler
Okay,
discussion,
so
Nicholas. I keep calling you that. I'm
so
sorry.
I've s- okay. So you know how the other episode or week, whichever, I forget when it was, like we'd felt that nothing had happened.
Yes.
I forget which. So besides for Hopper getting saved, and then the very, very end when Will's having his like seizure moment,
Mm-hmm.
Like, I feel like nothing happened.
Really?
I felt like it was a snooze fest. Yeah,
This episode?
I felt like, yeah,
I mean, I
yeah.
can see your
It
point.
just nothing,
However, I have to ask,
nothing grabbed
what
me.
about Murray? Did
I
you like
watched the
Murray?
entire thing. Nothing grabbed me.
Really? Not even Murray?
No, no, no,
I'm disappointed to hear that. I thought you would like Murray's
no,
character.
no. I couldn't. No, I didn't care for it,
Okay.
and I thought if it wasn't for Bob too, like they probably wouldn't have made it in time. But
I think we're
yeah,
losing
I
Nick
don't
on
know.
season
Just
2.
it
I think.
felt overall just felt boring to me. I was just like, oh, okay, this happens.
Would you
Like
have
that's it.
dropped off the show if
Nothing
you weren't forced to keep
peaked
watching it at this point?
at for this season.
Yeah, like would you
I
like
mean,
after watching this
just
episode?
because
Would
there's
you
a
have been like, eh?
few. I mean, like, I'm not willing to drop it like just snap of the fingers. I mean, just because there's a few episodes that don't immediately pique the interest, I'm not going to be like, oh, garbage, trash. Like, my favorite shows have even gone through the same thing. But, it's just, for me, it's just a personal lull. That's all.
Okay,
I don't think there's anything wrong with it. It's just how I guess how I perceive what is currently going on.
that's
Just
fair.
Yeah,
it just doesn't feel like a lot. That's just it.
Connor, what about you?
I I did enjoy it. I will rebuttal against Nick on this, and I think that yeah, I guess it's a lot more like underlying things that are going on, but like I think that one this episode definitely brings up is the mixing of new relationships and conflicts that I think were very interesting, like first impressions and like as we'll get into a little later when it comes to the Nancy Jonathan team up and Murray, the conflict you have with Lucas and Mad Max, um, the other conflict in a way of Joyce and Bob, and then later also Bob seeing Joyce's concern for Hopper, and then you also have the overall conflict of the 11 herself and dealing with her family. And I think there's a lot of like underseeing turmoil with I think turmoil is a good way to put it for a relative broader term of what we're seeing with the interactions between different types of relationships we have currently going on.
That's fair. Mitchell, do you have anything to say?
Yeah.
Have you had
Well,
time
now
to
that my
process it?
opinion is welcomed, I will say that I really
No.
enjoyed this. I will fuck you up. Uh, uh,
Play nice,
I
boys.
really enjoyed this episode. I had a good time with this episode. I think that this was the one that kind of got me back. The last one was good, but it didn't really it wasn't like wow. This one, I don't even know if it was like wow, but it was like, huh, all right, good. And it's good to be back on that track. Maybe this isn't the most consequential episode in the world, but it was the one that I thought had the most, that had me like, okay, I'm interested to see where this goes. Oh, that's an interesting thread worth pulling on. Ooh, that's something that I can't wait to see more of in later stuff, because I do think that as someone who has seen the show, this definitely hints at a lot, or not even hints, but it gives brief little glimpses of things to come. And I won't even hint or nudge at what those things are or aren't, but it was something that I enjoyed personally because I know that it was some of the things that I really enjoy. But just as an episode on a whole, I think that it got some new character relationships going that we hadn't previously had. I really liked the stuff with Murray. That was a character that they'd kind of set aside for the last few episodes, and I think that his dynamic with Nancy and Jonathan was a really nice back and forth, and you get to see Nancy actually make good choices in this episode. She kind of has her brain screwed on correctly, so props to the writers for letting Nancy be smart. And yeah, I like the way that we're back on track.
Yeah. Preach,
So
Mitchell,
fuck you,
preach.
Nick.
Yeah,
No,
this
it's
was
totally
definitely
it's
I
totally
feel like
understandable.
episode that
so
brought the season back onto an
I
upswing.
assume we've all played. I assume we've all played Mario Party, right? I, that's a
Yeah,
Which
absolutely.
one?
just any of them, like just the concept overall.
Any
so
of them, Connor.
I feel like this is when you're at the end of the round, and one person lands on the red spot, and it's a 3-on-1 mini game. I feel like I am the one in that situation.
Sorry.
I'm just Oh, and besides for the stuff for 11, I'll give you that, because that stuff wasn't bad, but everything else was just like
And
Yeah.
this was why I
Yeah.
posed the questions that I
very
do,
very
because
very yeah.
I wanted to
Very,
see
yeah.
what your and Connor's reactions were to this episode when we finally found out what happened to Eleven's mom, which we will definitely get into later. But it's definitely, like Mitchell was saying, they kind of allude to a lot of stuff throughout the show, and you always kind of wonder with TV shows, like, are they actually going to resolve this storyline? Because we've seen many TV shows where they set up some big threads and then they just never close them, and you're just left wondering till the end of time. Stranger Things does do a very good job of tying things together. But so with that, do you guys want to dive into the episode?
Let's go.
Nope, no, just kidding.
No?
I think this is a good place to cut the episode
Nope.
off. Thanks for listening, everyone.
I came here for 16 minutes and 7 seconds. No, I'm just kidding.
And all I got with this crappy shirt. So with that, let's start. So
That's right.
we start, I think, with Will's storyline, because that's kind of the underlying arc of the entire show. So I think it's worth talking about first. We start off with Will talking with Mike, and we definitely see a more intense relationship between Will and Mike in this season, where in last season, Mike was kind of between Dustin and Lucas, whereas this season we definitely see Will as Mike's best friend, and we definitely see that relationship grow, where Will is kind of opening up to Mike and telling him things that he's not even telling Hopper or his mom. And so he's kind of opening up and telling him how he can see everything that the shadow monster is doing, both in the Upside Down and in Hawkins. And he kind of goes into how the more it's spreading, the more he feels connected to it, which kind of goes more into our, Will's kind of possessed theme going on here. But Mike's being the good best friend, saying, hey, like, you can be like a super spy, you can tell us what's going on, trying to like make Will kind of feel better in the shitty situation that he's in. And Will brings up the point of, what if the monster can spy back? And that kind of brought kind of a Harry Potter kind of vibe to it, for those that have seen it, with the Horcruxes and the connection between... Stop shaking your head, Mitchell. Shut the fuck up.
No. Connor and I got to take the floor on this one. We were talking about this.
Really?
Buddy boy, Schnapp. My God, this kid can't act. Oh my
has
God,
nothing to do with his
this
acting.
was a horrendously acted scene with him,
We
and
have set
Finn
we have
Wolfhard
set
is
the, we
acting
have set the
circles
record
around
straight
this
that Noah
kid.
Schnapp can't act. We have set this record. I am not praising his
Yes,
acting.
but this isn't
I am
can't
praising
act.
the relationship arc
This isn't can't
between Will and
act.
Mike.
This is like actively bringing the scene down.
Yes.
Like Finn Wolfhard is just there. Like, again, it's like he's trying to act with the plank from Ed, Edd and Eddy. But like the plank is trying to have human emotions. And it's just like, oh my God, please, for the love of God, somebody get this doofus off screen.
And Mitchell, you and I know it doesn't get better from here. So it's just...
Oh no, in fact, it does get worse.
Yes, it does.
Much, 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 much worse. But this is...
You're making me
It
real
ain't good.
excited to keep watching.
Hey, you
Yeah,
just
go
gotta
right
ignore
ahead.
Noah Schnapp's character. That's all.
And luckily, it seems like for a lot of time they do ignore him. He's never really a main character, although his experiences drive the plot.
Yeah, it's just he's definitely the weak link, and we see it. But in terms of the actual show, Mitchell, in terms of the plot, not the acting, the relationship
Acting's
between
important.
Will and Mike is definitely growing, and we see that. Despite the acting is how bad it is,
Yeah,
we
but
can.
if the acting is that bad, I don't buy it.
You don't need a bite. You can just at
Like
least see it, understand what they're going for.
I buy the relationship between Max and why am I blanking on the damn kid's name?
Lucas.
You're racist.
Yeah, Max and Lucas. Like I buy when they're in scenes together. And we'll get into that later, but like that's something that I think that those two have incredible chemistry. So I'll spend a little bit more time highlighting the people that I think really do work well in scenes together moving forward. But
So should we
I
just
just could
cut
not
out
point it
Will's
out.
entire arc from the show and just not talk about it?
I mean, we're gonna have to talk about it. As long as the writers are talking about it, we gotta talk about it too. So
All right. So
I'll
let's
say
move on
this.
from
I will say
Will
this.
for a
Hold on.
hot second.
Hold on. I want to make one comment on this. I'll make one comment on this. For the fact that this has to do with Mike and Will, this being the scene with what the character Will's going through, having the actor being emotionless, also kind of because the kid's like no, we're assuming the kid himself is going through trauma, and having a kid who's showing no emotion, kind of like shell shocked the whole time, it kind of works. Like I'm not opposed by it. I would say that as a first time listener, I'm like, it's not a to a point where it's affecting my watching yet. The only scene I mentioned to Mitchell was the very end, which we'll get to in a second. We'll get to later on when we talk about it. But otherwise, like I honestly I did not think it was so egregious yet. I'm as you say, it's might get worse later. I will see when it comes to it. Um, but I think that it's been fine. I have no qualms so far. For the rest of the episode for this one. So, and I do agree with Tommy. Getting back up, getting the railroads back on track here. Yes, very similar to Harry Potter Voldemort thing. It's like they can kind of see what they're each other doing, and or possibly in that situation. And
Yeah.
I'm very intrigued how if if there actually is foreshadowing to what Will's saying that can he spy back on us? Because we don't really we know that the monster has feeling and we assume it's intelligent. Um, but there's no actual sign of actual communication yet or using Will's knowledge against him. So, or Will's, I guess I won't say knowledge, but Will's experiences against him. Like, oh, no, like for example, Mike's a good friend of mine. And so in turn, he could be one of Will's weaknesses. That's the kind of information that maybe the monster can gather. So I'm kind of curious if he can spy, quote unquote, spy back through Will, how if that is a case of foreshadowing, how will he use that against the members of quote unquote the reality world?
I like that you posed that question because we will get to that in a few episodes. Next episode is in fact titled The Spy, so that kind of puts a little context behind what
We'll
they're going
find
to focus on. So now you know it's definitely going to get touched on. So, but I'm glad you're thinking of it. But cutting away from Will, so Mitchell can relax for a minute, we're going to talk about how Hopper has a little exploration mishap in the Upside Down and gets squirted with some Upside Down juice. Because it was just an awkward, kind of weird thing how they had just. Every time I watch it, I laugh when he gets just sprayed. It's just like of all ways to attack him, like that's the way to do it. But So we see him collapse, just coughing a bunch of shit out because he's getting sprayed with all these different probably toxins and God knows what. And we see the little hole that he dug seal up. So now he's officially trapped in the Upside Down. And all of a sudden, Will wakes up
I want
back to Will again. What?
I didn't mean to cut you off. One thing that I thought of that did come up in this episode is like we understand that the monster itself for this one, we kind of assume it's the shadow,
Like for the season?
the shadow thing, which
Mhm.
for the season, yeah. Or I kind of assume it's a shadow thing that Will's been drawing that's currently now residing inside of him. But
Yes,
like,
that is like the
if it's
overarching villain for this season.
okay, so like if he's also part of the vines too, like kind of the thing that kind of I guess intrigued me is that like because the fact that I'm just going to put it in the Upside Down, you do see things that occur in the reality, like trees um and plants, and like there's things that they're same in the one world, same in the other. But
Mhm.
I'm kind of curious what doesn't reflect back, and like because to me, like, oh, if are these spores attached to the monster? Is it just one giant hive mind kind of situation? Like, I'm really like uh, what the overall scoping entity is. I'm not sure of yet, and
Okay.
it sucks that like Hopper, like to me, like I thought like kind of like a fungus spreading spores, like spewing at him. Like if
Yep.
you like sometimes you touch some mushrooms, like it can spew those kind of things, spores out.
Mhm.
It definitely got to kind of remind me of the situation, but no, I'm kind of curious what other, if everything is connected to this one thing, how far does it go? Of like what abilities does this thing have?
Okay. I mean, I'm not going to say anything because that kind of ties into the rest of the show.
Yeah, we'll
But
get to it. It's something that I
yeah,
just want to know. This is what's going through my mind as I'm watching this.
yeah, it's think of the Upside Down as a whole. I mean, it literally is a whole new dimension. So you get a whole new variety of not just monsters, but I guess plants. You could say in this
Mm-hmm.
sense.
Fauna.
So it's the spores aren't directly connected to the monster, but they are entities that can be used by the
That live
monster.
within
I
the
guess
world.
you could say.
Yeah.
But
Okay.
that's the best I could say without spoiling anything. But
We'll get to it.
so yeah. So we see Will waking up in a panic and runs to tell Joyce that he sees Hopper in the Upside Down, and that, in as best of a dramatic sense that Noah Schnapp can give, he's like, Hopper's gonna die. And again, it's just another Harry Potter moment where Harry wakes up with the dream of Arthur Weasley being attacked by the snake and wakes everyone up saying, hey, think your dad's dead. But it's just, again, Noah Schnapp can't act, and it's just that scene falls short, and it just makes me laugh every time I see it because it's just, it should be a very dark, messed up scene where it's like, oh shit, Hopper's gonna die, but it's just the way he presents it just is comical. But I know we've shit on Noah Schnapp enough today, so we'll move on. So it kind of goes back and forth between Hopper and Will in this whole sequence of scenes, if you will, where we have Hopper waking up again, and he makes like little makeshift face masks because he realizes he's probably breathing in a really shit ton of chemicals and toxins that are gonna hurt him. And then he starts leaving a trail of cigarette butts, which I thought was kind of funny because I don't know if he's trying to make a trail for himself or if he's hoping that someone else is going to magically stumble into the Upside Down and find him. But I don't know what his exact motive was, but he left a little trail of cigarette butts. Then switching back to Will, he starts making up this map of all the tunnels because they're trying to figure out where Hopper is, and Joyce keeps asking me like, "Where is he?" Like trying to get answers out of him. And she finally goes like, "Can you show us?" And he starts just scribbling page after page after page of just different colored and turns out to be a giant map. And then poor Bob shows up, and he's just trying to be a nice guy, and Joyce is like trying to push him off because they don't want to invite him into the chaos that is their house of we have a partially possessed kid that's now drawing a giant map of random colors and have no idea what's going on, and it's just the Christmas light fiasco all over again. But I give Bob credit. He's trying to be a good, father figure for Will, and he brings stuff over for him to try and, comfort him because he just thinks that Will's under the weather. But
Bob's
poor
the
Will.
man.
Bob the man. Bob saves this season. Bob was the best.
Bob is a builder of solid foundational relationships.
He was. And I think
hero of sorts.
he was. And
There,
Will
there are a
definitely
lot of
needs
little,
it, and Joyce needs it.
a lot of little things in this, like definitely in this episode that I really enjoyed, and like one that popped out to me was how much paper they're going through for Will to make this giant map, and it gets to the point that they're actually using Christmas wrapping paper as stuff for Will to draw on.
Yes.
And I'm like, it's just like it's getting to the point where like anything we can find, get it now. Like dig through the whole house and get anything you can get our hands on. He can draw on.
And it's
I think
funny
it's
because
so funny that you like
the scaling of this picture could have been downsized drastically, and it just you don't realize how much he colored until they have it set up all around the house, and they're physically running room to room, which is it's everywhere.
yeah.
I'm just like,
The dining room. Oh, that's where that dining room is. Yeah.
what I want to know is
Oh, that was
how many sets of crayons, because he was only using 2 or 3 colors. How many times
That's
did they have to
true.
run out and get more crayons? Because that
Yeah,
fucker-
I
paper throws
wondered
shit
the
done.
same thing, so thank you for asking that.
You are welcome,
I wondered the
because
same thing.
you and I have similar thinking patterns here. But I mean, he was scribbling hard, so he definitely had to wear out a crayon after like 4 or 5 pages, and there was at least 100 in that house, definitely more. So
No, probably close to 1,000.
yeah, well, I'm not gonna guess a number because there's too many pieces of paper. But anyway, color crayons aside,
Um, yeah, but Bob is someone I'm like real trooper. Like, I mean, I feel bad for him in this scene because like he wants to know and he wants to help.
Yeah.
But I don't blame Joyce for not letting
he's being
him
used.
in on this. Yeah, he kind of is.
And like,
Like,
I know like
I don't blame
everyone's
Joyce
afraid to
for like.
share. Everyone's afraid because they don't want to disclose the government secrets, and they sign NDAs and stuff like that. But it's like Bob came over to help, and Joyce was basically giving the runaround and basically told him to leave. And only when she realized, oh wait, Bob's good at puzzles, we can use him. Only then did they allow him in the house. Like they basically just use Bob for his brain at this point. But
at the same time, because this is why I kind of like this episode, because you have a nice foil here where I'm going to touch on it now. We have the scene with Lucas and Max, where Lucas does share with Max, hey, I don't want to leave you out. This is the shit that's going down. And Max just looks at him and just laughs at him. Like, oh, it's a great story, and doesn't believe him. Like, the amount of, for lack of a better word, fuckery that's been happening in this town is to a point where it's so unbelievable. And Murray even comments on that. This is too much.
Yep.
We need to dilute this to make this more tangible for the regular public to know. And Bob is part of the regular public, and he definitely would be more understanding after. I would say Bob would be an understanding person after seeing actual evidence, and like I could see him being like a ghost hunter kind of guy. So like I could see him definitely like being more accepting of it. But I also don't blame Joyce, because also Joyce has seen how other people have seen. Joyce has very dealt with other people thinking she's crazy. She
Yeah.
doesn't want to go through that again.
But
And
she was also called crazy by people that really didn't care about her enough.
that is very true.
In this instance, they're in a dire situation. It's like the fault of last season is what we spoke about, is how they didn't communicate and inform people because they could have had help earlier on. Here we're at a point where we have someone who wants to help, and I think is trustworthy and loyal enough to not just go spreading the information around town, basically like, hey, this is what happened. Like, Bob would keep his mouth shut, but they don't tell him anyway. And this is the
I
time
hope
to
he
get allies.
I hope he does get more into the group. Like he gets more let in because obviously he's going to have questions now, especially him being down. Like, and good for him that like, he jumped in with Joyce and he took the plunge with her. And I really hope that after the shit he's already seen, they're going to let him in. Like, this is what's been going on. No, these nightmares are actually reality that he's been going through.
Yeah, that's a very hopeful thing of you to think, Connor.
I hope so.
But so Bob does give or Sean Astin, I should say, gives a great Goonie reference where they're looking at the map and he sees the X and he makes the joke of, what's at the X? Pirate treasure? You know, obviously being a Goonies reference for those who have seen it. So then we get Bob, being the smart man that he is, starts recognizing patterns in the map that Will was drawing, and we find out that this was a map of Hawkins. And he realizes that the tunnels act like roads, or in his words, they act like roads and they don't go through water sources, which means it's going around them. And he can see shapes which kind of outline different things, which one of them was Lover's Lake, based on, I guess, like a heart shaped look to it. So he instantly realizes like all these different spots that are in blue are water sources, and they can basically measure out the locations to figure out where Hopper is, which was pretty fucking smart on Bob's point, and he basically saved Hopper's life at that point, because I don't think if Bob had realized that, they would have ever figured out what this was a map of.
Mm-hmm.
Because looking at it, it's just, one, the fact that it covered multiple rooms, so you don't have just it in front of you in one big picture. And it was all over the place. It was just a bunch of loops and swirlies, and it's like, who the hell would have known what that is? But Bob measures out all the locations and kind of pinpoints a spot on the map, says it's probably around here, which conveniently enough was where Hopper dug his little hole. And so at that point, we switch back to Hopper, who ends up getting trapped by the vines in the Upside Down and ends up just like Barb and Will, where he's basically pinned down without the vine up down his throat yet. But I'm sure that probably would have happened if he was there a little bit longer. And we have a quick cut scene to Dr. Owens, who are basically taking samples of dirt from all the farms, and they put a flame to one of them. And kind of to Connor's point earlier with the hive mind scenario, we see one patch of dirt react to all the others. So we kind of see a hive mind type reaction, which I think could give a little bit of idea of how everything's starting to connect via the Upside Down with some either virus or just maybe just physically being from the Upside Down. They're all connected. We don't really know that yet, but they're definitely showing that dirts from all these different farms are reacting by one of the samples of dirt being hit by fire. So that can kind of give you a little hint.
And one thing I commented, I have my notes of on my phone here. I was like, oh, like, with that reaction, like, oh, is the soil alive? Like, does it feel also, or like how much is the Upside Down spreading to the real world?
Mm-hmm.
And that's another thing where I'm like trying to like. I'm really intrigued how they're going to keep moving forward with this. Like, oh, like, yes, we've seen this giant tunnel system, but what's the true payoff here? And like, as in with the monster, and I'm really curious how they're going to keep the plot driving on this.
Yeah, it definitely takes an interesting turn, and we will see a resolve to some of it this season, but I won't say how or why, obviously. But we do get a little bit of a solution to it. So then after this, we have Joyce, Bob, Will, and Mike finally arriving where Hopper is, and Joyce and Bob goes in like a champ, not knowing what the hell he's going into. Joyce and Bob jump into the hole to find Hopper, and they find him tied down, and they save him. And just in time, the government agents show up, and they torch the place. And that's where we get, I'm sure, the scene that you and Mitchell were talking about, where Will just goes into a full-on, I don't even know what to call it, a seizure or
I was okay.
convulsion.
So
Like,
my
It was
text.
the most believable seizure ever. Duh. Duh.
My
Duh.
text to Mitchell
Mitchell,
directly.
that was sarcasm. Mitchell, that was
I'm
sarcasm.
just not going
just
to
let
acknowledge it.
know.
My text to Mitchell. I sent him a text right after I saw that. Was,
Yes, you did.
Quote: Will looked like a fish out of water at the end of that one. Like just his face, like kind of like it's like his lips are puckered out. He's like his cheeks look like he's like just squished in, like a fish trying to breathe. Like if you kind of suck your mouth in, and just like pulsating back and forth as he's like attempting to convulse. And I'm like,
and this was my joke from a couple episodes ago when Will initially gets attacked by the shadow monster, and he's just standing there having a little seizure in the field. He just
that was better. That was 10 times better. If he did it again, I'm like, okay,
it was 10 times better because half of the imagery was cut out because they had to throw the shadow monster into it, and they were spinning around him in circles. This was just a straight on shot of him, and you can see how bad he is at doing it.
Yeah, I also texted Mitchell 10 times worse than the first one.
Yes.
So this is
Absolutely.
this is in the notes.
Now,
Or
Yeah,
the receipts, that is.
it was bad.
Now, the bad Will imagery set aside, this should connect a few dots for you with the upside down getting burned and Will instantly falling to the ground screaming. Did that give any hints to you at all as to what's going on with the whole upside down shadow monster connection?
Oh yeah, so how I'm seeing it is that the monster can still like has a connection to the tunnel, and like again kind of hive mind-ish or hive mind-ish, where whatever the monster's feeling, Will can also feel. That's how I understood the scene. One thing that I want to comment though is with the scientist with the dirt is a kind of realization of Dr. Owen's like, oh shit, something is really going on.
Yeah.
Like, because at least they took action immediately. Because they took action without even knowing that they were out there. And of course, them trying to cover it up, but at least they took action on it. And of course, there's other boys out there, but like,
yeah,
it was definitely a wake up call for the Hawkins Laboratory of, yeah, something's bigger happening here, and I'm curious how Hopper's interaction with them now is going. Hopper's interaction with the laboratory now is going to increase, or their relationship going forward.
Yeah.
Like, is the laboratory actually going to be, cooperative with them, or are they still going to try to cover things up, or no? What is their plan of attack and motives in the end? Like, what is their end goal?
I wanted to circle back to Nick on this one too. Do you still feel like Dr. Owens is a bad guy after this episode? Are you starting to falter a little bit and see both sides? Or are you still fully convinced he's a bad guy?
What do you mean? What do you mean falter? Like, do I think there's some good in him?
Yes.
Like,
because in my opinion, had the doctor been reversed,
there are minor traces.
okay,
but
you're
I still
fully on
think
anti-team Dr. Owens.
there's minor traces, but I still think that his ultimate end goal is for something not pleasant. Like I think at the end of it, he's got ulterior motives.
Okay.
It's just
Because watching
he
the
has
scene,
that face. He's got that interaction. He's got that vibe. That just to me,
okay.
it's just like, yo, you're up to some conniving shit, you bastard. Like that's just how I feel about him.
So I feel like if the roles were reversed and this was Dr. Brenner, I feel like Dr. Brenner would just let them all die in the Upside Down and then come in afterwards and just torch the place and be like, "Oh, didn't realize there was people down there." But
Yeah, and like here's the thing. So like to for me, for for a guy like that and for a guy like Brenner, like it's nice that Hopper is keeping things quiet for them, but they would have done their little experiments anyway. They would have done whatever they wanted to do without Hopper getting into it. So like that to me is why I always think that ultimately he's got ulterior motives, because without Hopper, like to me, I don't think he gives a shit if he's watching over keeping the town quiet. He's gonna do his experiments, because he's got the security, and you know, well,
yeah,
what's someone gonna do about it?
good point.
I,
So, Tommy,
I
I have a
s-
question for you.
Yes.
Why have we spent 46 minutes talking about all the least interesting parts of this episode?
Because I figure you get the worst
I
part
think
over
it's
first.
interesting.
It didn't. No, stop. Stop.
Hey,
The stuff
we
with
have first time viewers here. This is interesting. We have seen it multiple
Okay.
times, Mitchell.
Okay. I thought I was going to be the one championing this episode the most, but you've got me rethinking things.
I think it was I think it was interesting. Like and going back when it comes to I know Nick, you're shaking your head. Uh, I had to at least comment on that. Like when it comes to with the other doctors, Dr. Owens, like I still see him more egotistical. Like I see him as someone who like he thinks he's the one who's right, but but once evidence is shown, actual evidence is thrown in his face of like, oh, the serial is kind of fucked up. Then he's like, oh shit, I gotta fix this. Like,
Yeah.
more like a full of himself situation.
And to answer
Uh,
your question, Mitchell, we have to spend this much time on Will's story arc because unfortunately Will is connected to some of the best characters in the show, such as Hopper, Joyce, and Bob. And I will be damned if I skipped over Samwise Gamgee's part in this role in the show.
I
So
mean, you
that is
do what
why.
you want, but it was definitely the least compelling part of the show.
And that's why we're gonna now move on to bigger and better things, which is the part I was more excited to talk about with Connor and Nick, and that is the revelation of what happened to Eleven's mom. You've seen this, Mitchell. You knew what happened. Don't shake your head at me. Eleven's mom. We find out what happened. I thought that was a very important part of the show.
I was surprised that we had the payoff so quickly.
Yes,
Yes.
that part was very important. I do admit.
So
Um,
we definitely it's a very short sequence of events in this episode, but it's very straight to the point. We have 11 walking through the house, realizing that, oh shit, my mom's actually trying to communicate with us because she sees all the light flickerings, and Becky kind of just realized, like, it's just the lighting in the house. It's bad. But we get more of the actual sequence in that Terry is repeating the same things over and over, and it's breathe, rainbow, 3 to the right, 4 to the left, sunflower, and 450. And we get 11 going into the void to find her mom and sees her mom's nose bleeding. So that kind of gives a hint, like her mom kind of has the same powers or similar powers to 11. So that answers that question. And we see it's all the different phrases are connecting to scenes from when she had Jane to when Jane was taken away from her. And then she goes on this whole hunt to find Jane. And Connor was right last episode where the numbers alluded to a combination to a safe, but it had a gun, and that was what was in the vault. And she took the gun, shot a security guard, and basically went on a manhunt through Hawkins' lab trying to find her kid. Which I'm surprised she made it as far as she did, but I guess that's why they have so much security in that lab now. But
Possibly.
and then Rainbow was alluding to the little rainbow sticker outside of Jane's door, which we also see Jane sitting with number 8, or Callie, who is the girl we saw in the first episode of the show. So we got to see a little connection between the two characters and see that they're a little more connected than we originally thought. So Connor, Nick, and Mitchell, what were your reactions to this scene?
Y'all go ahead.
Yeah, I was pleasantly surprised. Again, I was not expecting to get this information so quickly. But like, it was definitely a interesting turn seeing her, like, I guess the mom's story arc all play out at once. Where and it was definitely interesting seeing like 11 like literally experience that through her visions that the mom was giving her. Like her going in, seeing Dr. Burner's face taking the baby, and then like trying to deal with pretty much the gaslighting that she has, unintentional gaslighting, I guess from Becky, but like, knowing that her child was alive and was not a stillbirth, and then her going crazy in the lab, and it's definitely. I'm really curious how Levin's is gonna process all this information, because to her, someone who does not really know how to deal with her emotions yet, I'm wondering how she's going to react to it, because we didn't really get a full on reaction after the fact.
Yeah, and we do finally see what actually put 11's mom kind of in that state where she was basically strapped down and given electroshock therapy at the maximum voltage, which was what the 450 meant. So instead of killing her, they just simply made her into a vegetable.
Yep.
So that was what I thought was probably the most interesting but very short sequence of events of this episode. We see a lot more progression to 11's backstory and what happened to her at her birth.
I gotta say, I think, I don't know if it's a director thing or not, but like having at the very end going through the mom's mind of, because she's we see the individual events separately, and then we revisit the events at the very end while the mom's saying it. And how I took it was like, oh, she's reliving all these events over and over and over and over and over again.
She's basically in her own personal hell.
Yeah, and she's just taking these quick snapshots, and like having the audience and be with Elle going through this, I thought was a very good way to have that come across the way that it did.
I agree. So if anybody else has any comments, I think we'll move on to my favorite part of the episode and the introduction of probably my favorite character of the season, and that being the infamous Murray, the private investigator that Barb's parents hired. So we move on. Jonathan and Nancy go on another little adventure. They get a hotel room and share separate beds and have a very kind of down-to-earth conversation of, why have we drifted apart, all that kind of nonsense, all things Mitchell, I'm sure, was hating.
Why would I hate it?
Nancy was
Team
slowly going, basically straight up told Jonathan that she was waiting for him.
Team anti Nancy. So hard right now. So hard.
Yeah,
No, I
always,
actually
always FOB.
Because the
Tyler,
conversation literally
get her
went.
off the screen.
She said
I had no
Recast
she,
her.
problem with it.
really. I'm shocked.
No, I thought it was in character for all people involved.
That's just
So
that's aggressive.
There it is.
So we
Hey.
were all fully on team anti Nancy. I all for it.
I'm
But
not on team anti Nancy at this current moment in time, and that's because of the way that she interacted with Murray. I thought that Jonathan, again, too many people in this series playing the role of Plank from Ed, Ed, and Eddie, just standing there looking out into space, whereas Nancy seemed to communicate with Murray quite well.
So what I'm getting at is the love triangle aspect of it. I
Yeah.
think Nancy I'm saying Nancy as a relationship item. That's what I'm saying. Team anti Nancy. Like she is smart, and I thought she was a very good episode for her.
And as I said the other day too, I think Nancy is held back by Jonathan and Steve. If she didn't have them in her life, she'd be going much farther places.
Well, yeah, you could say that about any teenager.
Yeah. But we visually see it because Steve is just the dumb jock that, kind of keeps her on the preppy side and not looking to strive for her future. And Jonathan is just the, not to say deadbeat, but he's not really going
Doofy
anywhere
little
in life.
nobody.
Huh?
Doofy little nobody.
Yeah, I guess you could say that. Yeah, it's just like he's not bringing anything to the table
No.
that can really make Nancy thrive. And that's where I'm team Nancy because she definitely deserves better. But in terms of the love triangle, yeah, team anti Nancy. It's just she just plays with both of them in their heads. I mean,
This
she straight up
subplot This
she straight up
subplot was
told
all
him.
about Murray, though, as far as I'm concerned.
Yes, this was
No,
all.
I-
This was all about them setting Murray straight, and then Murray kind of helping them with, if you have this overall goal of taking them down, here's the more realistic way to go about that than just here's what we have, believe us.
So they basically, I just love Murray's setup and how he's just in this like little warehouse bunker home that he's made for himself. And I told Connor the other day before he watched it to let me know when he saw it because it was instantly a Charlie Day from Always Sunny reference where you just have the conspiracy board of just a million different strings connecting to a million different things. And it's just a giant clusterfuck of a board.
It's the Pepe Sylvia meme, people. Pepe Sylvia.
So those that have seen Always Sunny will understand that. But Nancy, like we just said, like she instantly just starts punching holes in Murray's kind of timeline that he has set up, and you see Murray's face kind of drop when she just starts just dropping facts like, oh, the girl wasn't Russian, she was American, her name was 11. Bar wasn't here at this time, like all these different things, and Murray's just like, oh shit, like this girl actually knows what she's talking about. Like he took them in as kind of a little joke. He didn't think they were going to have anything factual, but Nancy proved him wrong. And that definitely gave a lot more credit to Nancy's character and that she's actually smart and knows what's going on. And like you said, Mitchell, like she knows how to interact with people intellectually and actually hold a conversation and be like, hey, this is actually what's going on.
I think Nancy does this thing that I think a lot of us are guilty of, especially as teenagers, and that is dumbing ourselves down for people or rising to the occasion when certain challenges, like if we need to be smarter in a situation and speak with more emphasis, we can do that. But if we think that being dumber will attract somebody, well, as a teenager, you're going to start hitting your head with some hammers.
Yep.
That's just that's just the way that it goes.
But and then so they finally start going into the whole story of what happened. They show him the tape, and Murray just instantly just gets out the vodka, and Jonathan and Nancy don't understand what he's doing. And he kind of brings out the whole analogy of it's too strong and you got to water it down. So amen to the alcoholics out there, because Murray just pulled out a great analogy using alcohol.
Amen to the alcoholics out there.
As I
Sure,
sit
I
here
want-
drinking my bourbon.
Yeah, you have a message for anybody as you drink what is, I'm sure, bourbon.
It is. That's
Oh,
what I
well.
just said.
So
Alcoholics Anonymous, right across the corner.
That's for quitters.
Yeah, I thought you're right. I do like Murray. I think he's a very fun character. I'm looking through your show doc here, and I definitely want to touch on some things with him.
Spell check it. Good Lord. Sorry, Tommy.
Look,
On the fly.
on the fly, I'm not sitting here for this. Isn't being submitted for grading. It's just notes.
It's not. So I just want to clarify, because it wasn't an immediate analogy at first, because it did take him some time to think about the analogy.
Yeah, and that's why
It's
he
like he
needed
had-
vodka. He needed to think and process, as we do.
Because as someone who definitely does I code once in a while, and I have to have a certain setup for me to code in, because of the fact that if I'm not in the right headspace, you're kind of screwed, and you literally have writer's block, and I can definitely see Murray. No, at first I thought Murray was crazy, and no, there are some things that he's not crazy like Joyce is, or Joyce was seen as previously. I think he's just,
I wouldn't even say he's crazy. He's eccentric.
Eccentric is the right word. Yes, that's the word I was looking for. Because the fact that he sees something up, he's definitely sniffing around. He's not getting much, and definitely Nancy is the golden goose that he's been looking for.
Mm-hmm.
And he literally Nancy and Jonathan did not introduce themselves. He saw their faces, knew exactly who they were immediately once they
He
had the
knows
video camera.
everybody.
He's been doing his homework, and yeah, he's
something that goes to show how good of a journalist he was, because we know he was a quote unquote disgraced journalist, and it's that he knows and understands how the world works. And Jonathan and Nancy, being young and stupid, don't. And he brings up a great point when they're like, it's clear as day, and he's like, you don't need me to believe you. I've already brought you in. I know something's up. He's like, you need the people out there, the everyday American people, to believe your story. And he says, another great quote of, once the government comes out and says something official like bullshit, everyone else is going to follow in tow and say, yeah, it is bullshit. So he kind of is like, hey, you need to really work on the story and make it relatable enough to the everyman person to understand what's actually going on, because this is a bunch of craziness that you're presenting.
and the reason why earlier in the episode I brought up turmoil, because you have different types of turmoil going on. You have for the turmoil for these two is more of a maturity thing of Nancy being a young kid thinking, oh, my story's not being believed, he's just another nobody. While Murray, on the other hand, is being a lot more mature. I'm thinking, from a journalist side of view, yeah, this is something that goes deep, but I need to make sure that this thing gets read and understood. And they brought it up. And then once Nancy it clicked in her brain of, oh, you're diluting the story to make it a lot more digestible for people to understand. And the one reference they brought up was the 3 Mile Island accident, which, for those of you who don't know, was a nuclear power plant in Pennsylvania that had I believe it was a nuclear fallout.
Pennsylvania.
It was Pennsylvania. Yeah. Londonderry County, Dauphin County, Pennsylvania. So it's something that it was the the water supply got screwed up, and it was a lot of things that happened. And this happened in 1979, so it definitely
I'm a
follows the.
dumbass. I got it confused. I thought you were referencing Chernobyl, and I'm like,
No,
Chernobyl
Chernobyl
did
is
not happen in Pennsylvania.
Chernobyl is
Close.
Ukraine.
No,
That's in
just kidding.
Ukraine.
Yeah,
Not close at all.
it's close by though.
No. But the thing is, when it comes to those kind of situations, like, no, you have contaminants in the ground, and it's something that is the key thing. It's something tangible that the public can grasp onto, and they can make it an allegory of something they already know of and experience. And no, like nuclear power these days, it's much, much, much more safer than it was back 40 years ago. And no, because it does different regulations. But like way back when, 3 Mile Island was a situation where those who were looking to promote nuclear power was a real black eye for those people who try to promote it. And it still kind of is till this day. Um, so it's definitely a really good analogy, and for those who know about the incident, a good way to understand what their game plan is. Yeah, but I like Murray though. He's fun. I like him a lot.
So I think this brings us on to the last two little bits of character arcs for this show or episode. And we touched on it briefly before with Lucas and Max. Again, it's not a very long set of scenes this episode, but we definitely see Lucas bringing Max into the party without the rest of the party's approval. And I don't know if it's a desperation for Lucas wanting to get with Max or just wanting another friend or some other alternative motive, but Lucas, for some reason, just really wants to bring Max into what's going on. And I still don't know if it was the right thing to do, but because we don't know Max as a character very well yet. Bob, we know, would be trustworthy and loyal. Max is kind of a sarcastic jerk, I guess you could say. But she's fun, and Lucas wants to bring her into the group. And we see him taking Keith up on that bribe, which Keith references the
Oh,
date, and it's definitely alluding back to the first episode where Keith was trying to bribe Mike with a date with Nancy. So they don't say who the date is with, but I'm pretty sure it's very easily implied that Lucas basically offered Keith a date with Nancy if he reserved the back room for Max. So I thought that was funny and worth noting. But it was the Dig Dug machine that Keith broke down, quote unquote. So hence the title of the episode as well. But he basically tells her, like, if you accept the risks of the knowledge, I'll tell you. And Max just thinks he's full of shit and still doesn't believe him. So it's just funny of how desperate Lucas wants to bring Max in, but no matter what he tells her, she doesn't believe a word he says. So it's just Max annoys me a little bit in these episodes. It's just, I don't know if it's just young
I
teen
honestly
angst.
understood where Max was coming from with at a point. Again, in this episode, she understands. Oh, okay, this is actually something that I need to be taking seriously. But I get why at first, because they they play D&D, they talk all this fantastical stuff. I can see why she thinks these kids just have a really vivid imagination and maybe take this a little too far.
Yeah.
But
And it's not until she starts kind of yelling in the middle of the arcade stuff about like Hawkins' lab, and Lucas literally covers her mouth and is like, "Just shut up! Like you're gonna get us
they've got
killed."
good. They have good
Was
on screen chemistry, and they
Yes.
are two of my favorite actors in this series amongst the kids. Um, I really think that as we go further along, you'll see more of that as well. But Caleb McLaughlin in particular, I thought was really strong because he was able to show comedic range in this kind of altercation while also showing really good dramatic chops. I was really impressed with him. He's going to be in a movie coming out in a few weeks called The Book of Clarence, and it'll have been the first thing that I've seen him in since, or that isn't Stranger Things. So I'm really looking forward to that because he's a talented guy.
Yeah. Let me know how that goes. I've never even heard of that movie.
Oh, it looks good.
But and the last little scene of that sequence is when Max gets picked up by Billy. She warns Lucas, "Don't follow me out." And we've seen this a couple times where Billy's kind of warned her, like, "Hey, like, I don't want you talking to him." And we definitely see that Billy's a little bit of an asshole racist. And obviously, it's well known no one's supposed to like Billy, but it's just like Billy's a dick. So that's really all I have to say about Billy. But
Has
Yeah.
Billy done one likable thing except for like lovingly
No.
glancing at Steve's dick in the shower?
no, I mean
Like,
and I've tried not to talk about his character throughout this season so far, just because aside from trying to run the party over while they're on their bikes and constantly bully Steve around, he doesn't do anything other than just be a complete dick to Max. So it's just
Yeah.
I don't see any noteworthy reason to talk about his story arc because he doesn't have one.
That's
He's just
fair.
the asshole. He's the Tommy of this season. He's just an asshole to Steve.
I think, to me at least, the only seed that I can see like story arc wise so far is the Steve and Billy story arc. Because the fact that there was one interaction with the basketball game, and I did put it down in my notes, where it was like Billy went hard to him, like I guess the right term is in the paint, I guess you can say, and again, I don't know basketball terminology.
I guess he said he went hard in the paint.
No, I'm trying to find the right terminology basketball wise.
You
Like
could throw in some other words and get into a lot of trouble.
what I'm trying to say is like
or just the way you said it.
Yeah. It's the whitest way you could have possibly said that.
well, my mind is not in the gutter in this situation.
He was. It ain't the gutter.
It didn't even need
He
to
was.
be.
He was driving in,
Oh,
and
wow.
Billy told Steve, "Set your feet, take the charge," as opposed to continuing to go with him and
Draw
basically
the charge,
get
he
run
said.
over. Yeah, draw the charge.
But the thing is, like, he didn't have to give him that advice. So, like,
True.
and that's something that intrigued me because the fact that I think Billy kind of may try to make an ally out of Steve.
No,
And
it's definitely more of Billy saying, "I know more than you, and I'm better than you. Here's a little advice."
See, yeah, I took it more as less as, "Hey, take the charge." That way, I took it more as, "You can't keep up with me, so you might as well set your feet, draw the foul, because I'm just better than you."
to me, I didn't take it that way because in the shower scene, also him's like, "Oh, ditch that girl. You can get so many more." Like he's trying to.
Yeah, but then he also goes, "There's plenty bitches in the sea. I'll try and leave you some," and then walks away. See, he's trying to give
Yeah.
the friendly advice, but in the way of,
yeah.
"I'm the superior guy here. You're the leftovers."
Because everything is with, you're right, everything is with that, yeah, but don't forget that I'm on top.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess so. I'm again. I don't know how this is going to go. You guys have already seen interactions with him in the future, but like to me, I'm just intrigued how it would develop.
Do you see do you think there's a little glimmer of hope in Billy's future?
No, I think he's a complete asshole. I'm more so
Okay.
curious about how Steve is going to be receptive after dealing with the shit that would realizing Nancy's with Jonathan again. After I guess we can kind of jump into it in a bit. I don't know. I don't. To me, Steve's in limbo. Too bad for the guy. He's in limbo
Because he's not able to come hard inside of the paint, so to speak.
Why'd you have to say his name like that? Why'd you say it like Jonah Hill from The Wolf of Wall Street? Steve.
Do not. I do not know the reference for that, so sure.
Steve.
Steve.
Oh,
Watch
man.
the movie and you'll get
Yeah,
the
you'll
reference.
you'll understand the reference. But see, Steve takes on a whole new role in this season, and I am excited for you guys to see his arc because he definitely adopts a new version of Steve in this show in a few episodes, but we'll get to that point. And we do get to a little bit in this episode, so I think we'll switch over to the final part, and that's Dustin's little story arc of this show, and that's where he traps his pet Demogorgon Dart.
There wasn't enough Dustin in this episode. I
There wasn't.
loved everything we got though.
Dustin is the comedic relief of the show, but he also, I think, has enough acting and comedic ability to hold his own story that he doesn't need help. Because just the way he
Mhm.
interacts with people is just great. And we start off with him talking to his mom,
I felt so
and
bad
we
for the
see
mom. I'm
Yeah,
just
I
gonna throw
did
it in there
too.
now. I felt
I
so
did
bad
too.
for her. She's calling for Muse, and I'm like, oh no.
and it's
Oh.
but it's cute and funny at the same time because you see Dustin on the phone and you quickly realize he's on a fake phone call to make his mom to make his mom feel better, but to also get her out of the house so he can go deal with Dart. So
And
it's just
dead
like
cat.
he's that sweet kid, but at the same time he's got like that really good mischievous comedic kind of vibe to him. But so he gets his mom out of the house, and as any middle schooler does, he armed up with the best thing he had, and that was hockey pads.
It was
Which,
hockey and catcher gear.
Yeah,
yes,
it was a combo of the two.
it was a
Yes.
combo. So he's kind of a little scrappy, but he's definitely I'm picking up he's the goalie if he ever did play hockey, but we never see him play sports. So I'm not quite sure where he got all this gear from.
If,
So that's a
in
mystery
reference
to me.
to a nice 90s show or 90s kids show, uh, kind of a very squid like in Rocket Power.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's okay. That's a good comparison. I like that.
And a great show.
It's a great,
It is,
wonderful show.
Yeah.
Very slept on. That needs to be remade.
No.
No.
What
Only
the
if
hell's wrong with you?
only if it's good.
Put it back on TV. That's all you need to do.
If they can bring
The
it
episode's
back,
already made.
I
Episode's
know.
already made. You're good.
Remake it. Yeah.
But like
No,
make
You need
more
to
of it.
remake your opinion.
No.
Stop.
They remade Teen Titans.
Damn, shots
They
fired.
trashed that.
No,
No.
I'm
What
not
they
even
need?
talking about that.
Do they need to remake fucking Blue's Clues now? No, they don't need to do that.
I never said they did. But anyway, so we get Dustin with his little makeshift armor dropping slices of bologna throughout the house outside towards their little storm cellar. And just every word out of him is just a curse. He opens up his door and runs, just going shit, 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 shit down the hallway. And it's just funny because all he does is curse all the time. And it's definitely my personality coming out. I see a lot of myself in Dustin sometimes. And he's hiding in
Alcoholic who overuses profanity.
yes,
Man.
in a comedic way. And so we see him hiding. I don't know if it's a shed or what he was hiding in, but he's sitting there watching
Yeah.
Dart come out of the house. And quickly Dart says, "I'm not feeling the bologna anymore. I want some human." And quickly locks on to Dustin's scent, and Dustin quickly realizes, like, all right, he's coming for me now. And just the way he charges out was just like just that kind of slow but fast waddle motion because he's got all the pads on, and just fucking slapstick darts right to the head and smacks him into the storm cellar. And
Nice little thud too.
yes,
Off the cellar door, like dung. It's like, ooh, that was nice.
like,
Yeah, it was nice
it was
back
good contact. I'll give him that. He's got very good hand-eye coordination. But Dart gets knocked down and just traps the door just in time. I was waiting for Dart to kind of like jump out and like break it open while he was trying to close it, but thankfully for Dustin, he managed to lock it in. So then we get Dustin, like just a whole montage of Dustin radioing the party with code red. You know, shit's going down. He's sitting scrubbing all of Muse's blood out of the carpet. So I don't know how long it's been that his mom's been out of the house looking for Muse, but it had to have been at least an hour at this point. But he's just sitting there scrubbing the whole time, just constantly radioing. And Erica picks up and tells him to shut the hell up.
Funny scene.
Oh, great scene. Great bratty younger sister vibe of just, you're annoying and a geek. Stop radioing. It's annoying. And Dustin's like, all right, I'm giving up. And he just goes out because back in those days, that's how he had to do. We had to bike to everybody's house and ring the doorbell and see who was home. And another great interaction with Mr. Wheeler, the useless man that he is. And it's just, I love the interaction with just like all of Mr. Wheeler's answers to Dustin was just comical. It's just like, oh, like, where's Mike? And just calls back to his wife. Where's Nancy? Calls back to his wife. He's like, our kids don't live here. Didn't you know that? And just, I felt like that was my bad because we were just always out and about, God knows where. So it's just like, my dad had no idea where I was half the time growing up. He just knew I was out doing something stupid, probably. And Dustin just with that great, like, you're really just fucking useless. You know that? And just like storms off, and Mr. Really just like, hey.
What's your language?
Just completely useless. And he probably closed the door at
He
that
is
point
so
and sat right
useless.
back on the couch.
Yeah, he
That was a
wasn't
great
even
scene.
doing anything, and then he complained that he had to get the door. Like, you bum ass. Get your fucking ass up, you bitch. Like, God.
I also want to point out
He
too
sucks.
that because he tried the phone and it's like, oh, your phone line's been busy for 2 hours. His mom's been on the phone for 2 hours talking to someone else as well.
And that was very true though back in those days too. If you ever tried to call someone's phone and you got the busy line, like, crap, like it was a dead line. It's like you just had to either wait and you keep calling back and you keep getting that busy signal. So you're like, all right, I'll just ride my bike over there and see who's around.
For the youngins, there was no voicemail back then.
I know.
That was the technology that came out in the 90s, I think.
Those were back in the days where you got the class roster, like you get everyone in your class and it would have like their house phone. That was your only line of communication to those people. Was like, all right, let's go to the school list of who's got the numbers and just start calling people.
Mm-hmm.
But so then we get him running into Steve, who's giving himself a little pep talk, holding some flowers, obviously going to try and find Nancy, who Dustin quickly and rudely tells him, hey, Nancy's not home. Come with me. I need your help. Get in the car. And just completely bosses Steve around, which I thought was great. And it's no spoiler, but we definitely see a new side of Steve going forward where he kind of joins the party in a way, but it's more of he's dragged into it by Dustin. And it's just great. It's just the interaction between Steve and Dustin is pure gold, and I want more of it.
No, definitely. I was pleasantly surprised if like Steve's like, all right, kid, like I'm on a ride to somewhere, like, or I'm driving him somewhere, like he's no clue what's going on.
And that's kind of shown what Steve's character has been through in the season, where he's not the popular kid at school anymore. He doesn't have a girlfriend. He doesn't have any friends at all at this point that we know of, because he's not friends with Tommy and Carol anymore. And him and Nancy are broken up, I guess you could say. And it's just, he doesn't have anybody. So it's like this random kid's like, hey, get in your car. He's like, all right, I guess you're my friend today. Just like, all right, let's go. Let's do this. But yeah, and that wraps up the episode on kind of a light note. So definitely one of my favorite episodes of the season. Not the top favorite, but it's definitely getting up there. But if anything, if you guys have any other things to say, but I say we go on to ratings and wrap this episode up because it's coming on 90 minutes at this point.
It's been a long one.
Yeah.
I'm gonna get right into it. I am gonna give it a 8.9. Again, I score higher, Mitchell, than average compared to you guys.
That's true.
Like,
that is very true.
Like, this is compared to season 1. Like, I scored multiple episodes in season 1 over 9, and I had 2 that were 8.9. So to me, this feels right to me. And again, I really enjoyed this episode. There's a lot of things that were going on that I am intrigued about. So, again, I thought it was better than last week. So, 8.9 it is. Nick,
Well, I'm gonna bring down the average here.
do it, man.
That's all right.
Not intentionally, but you know, I
We
have to
want your
preface
honest
this by
opinions,
saying
Nick.
I don't think it was a. This is the this is. I have to preface this by I don't think it was a bad episode. I don't by any means think it was a bad episode. I think just the way that I guess that I perceived it, the way it came across for me, was that I just didn't think a lot happened. So because of that, and the few things that I did enjoy from it, I'm just gonna flat give it like a 7.5, 7.5.
That was
Okay.
higher than I thought you would
Leave
give
it,
it, honestly.
just leave it at that.
I thought
Yeah.
you were going to cross
I
into
was
like the
first
5
thinking
range.
like a 7. No, I was at first thinking like a 7, but then I thought, then I got reminded of, uh, the whole part with 11, and I thought that was like actually very important, like you said. So then that kind of bumped it up by a half. But everything else was, kind of eh. At least to me, just to me.
Yeah. So I'm going to give it a 8.3. Because like I said, it's definitely one of my more favorite episodes of this season. But as a whole, I think this season was definitely the weak link of the show. But I like the character arcs in the show. I like almost the new pairings. I guess you can say you have more of a Joyce Bob team up in this episode with Mike. You have Lucas and Max teaming up, which are a great combination. And then you have Dustin and Steve at the end to kind of tie it together, and that's definitely the highlight. And then of course Murray. Murray was hands down my favorite character of this season. So his introduction is just what made it really good for me. So 8.3.
Cool. Mitchell prediction. Mitchell, you have your thing written down?
I don't have it written down, but I know what it is, and I wouldn't lie to you guys.
Sure. I'm gonna go for an 8.01. Tommy.
Damn,
Or-
I gotta change mine now.
You
was
can't.
it-
It
Just do
wasn't.
it.
It wasn't 8.01, but I was thinking 8.10.
Just
So
do
now
that.
I
That's
feel
fine.
like that's dangerously close.
Hey,
But
go with it. Go your gut.
because of our time, I'm just gonna say 8.10. Leave it at
Okay.
that.
I'm gonna go with a. I'm gonna go with an 8.48.
Wow, really high.
I don't know.
I think you're over the Price is Right rules on that one, bud.
I think so, but Mitchell was optimistic in saying that he liked this episode, so I don't know. I'm
Mitchell,
I'm feeling hopeful on this one.
are we all over? Because I have a feeling we are.
8.55.
That's right,
Wow.
motherfuckers. That's fucking right.
That's where I fall on this. I think we spent a lot of time. The reason why I think you guys went over is because we spent a lot of time talking about the stuff that didn't interest me quite as much, and I don't think it took up quite as much of the episode as it took in our episode talking about it. And I liked
True.
Bob in those aspects. There wasn't quite as much Hopper, which is usually a bad thing. I usually like to have a lot of Hopper, but the stuff with Dustin was really good. I thought all the stuff with 11 and her mom was fantastic, and I liked hearing what you guys had to say about it, Nick and Connor, because it is one of the more out of left field, I guess, elements of this particular episode, because it goes to some pretty dark places, and I liked the character interactions, and it reminded me of stuff that I've grown to love in future episodes. So 8.55, we're back on track.
And I'm back on track as being the winner, so thank you.
8.3125 is the average.
And this is why you guys, I know you like to rag on me and make fun of me and be like, oh, Mitchell, yeah, precise, accurate, all that bullshit. But it also gives us a much more detailed score, so that when this is all said and done and we can like rank our episodes, we're gonna have a
Mitchell,
much
we,
more
we made this
specific.
segment to make fun of you.
Yes, and I am talking about this right now.
You
to-
realize this,
while,
correct?
while you are making fun of me, I'm shitting on your head.
I'm still gonna laugh.
Okay.
Because averages, no matter what, are still gonna work that
man.
way.
To quote Paul Giamatti from one of my favorite movies this year, The Holdovers, my grade, my this little section is a henhouse ladder, shitty and short.
Well said, sir. Well said.
Alrighty then. I think that's everything, correct, gentlemen? It's been a
Yeah,
long one.
that's it. Let's wrap this bad boy up.
Sounds good. Thank you for listening in to our wonderful episode here. We have next week, we have was it episode 6? Yeah, episode 6, The Spy. So we'll see how that one goes. Follow on socials, usual stuff. At Stranger Nerds on Instagram, Twitter, and we'll see you next time for episode 6. Have a good one.